Cowardice asks the question, is it safe? Expediency asks the question, is it politic? Vanity asks the question, is it popular? But conscience asks the question, is it right? And there comes a time when one must take a position that is neither safe, nor politic, nor popular, but he must do it because conscience tells him it is right.
Every time our country stands in the path of danger, an instinct seems to summon her finest first, those who truly understand her. When freedom shivers in the cold shadow of true peril, it's always the patriots who first hear the call. When loss of liberty is looming, as it is now, the siren sounds first in the hearts of freedom's vanguard.
Fighting for humanity and against globalism, one mind at a time. It's the Freedom Link with Joe Joseph.
Yes, it's another exciting episode of the Freedom Link. Hello, everybody. Joe, Scotty, we're here. It's the 23rd of December. I know you'd probably say, well, why aren't we just doing a rebroad tonight? Why? Because it's just another day. It's another Saturday night, and I feel all right. Come on, everybody. That's what I'm talking about. You know what I'm saying? How you doing, buddy?
No, I'm doing great, man.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good. What you doing? Anything special over the holidays?
Just the usual, hanging out with family and,
As everybody should, take advantage of the time. We'll get a little bit into the history of some of these holidays that are done in a name of, let's just say, the road to hell is paved by good intentions. We'll just put it that way. But the focus of tonight is really to make people feel a little more inclusive, if you will, but not in a DEI sense. Oh, yes. I'm going to use that word because
inclusive.
Well, maybe it'll boost the numbers on YouTube if we could do that, right? We'll just start using their own words for that purpose. So needless to say, there's been some poll numbers that come out, but everybody's so shocked. The economists are shocked, right? That we just don't get it. We don't get how people aren't ecstatic over this economy, over this, the things that are happening right now, and record low unemployment and everything else. And it's kind of funny because obviously everybody knows it's not true. They believe there what their eyes are seeing, and here we go. And they know that it's going to be bad because it's already bad. It's been bad for a while. It's not getting any better.
I mean, we're at a point in history
People
right now
with a lot of money are bitching.
Where what we're being told and what we can actually see, it's blatantly obvious that those two things do not match up, right? And so, before the media could kind of get away with telling you that, things are going to be all right, or things are going this way, or things are going.
They control the information stream, right? So they could
at least put on the illusion, or people felt like things were all right and that things were okay, right? But now, like, the reality of the situation is actually setting in, and people are going to the grocery store and they can't buy food, right? People cannot afford to pay their bills. People cannot afford their mortgages. People are actually struggling, and then they turn on the TV and they're being told by their government and by the media that everything is hunky-dory, and that if you complain about it or if you even mention it, then hey, you're the problem. Something's wrong with you.
Well, let me say this too, because for people our age, it is a issue. Gen X, we were the baby boomers were our parents. And so it's a pretty high standard. The baby boomers they had, they basically, I mean, don't get me wrong, they lived through the inflationary period of the 70s, the fuel embargoes, the race riots. It was a very tumultuous time in the United States, and a time of high inflation, of high unemployment. I mean, I remember as a kid, seeing Toyota commercials where they had the first Toyota-thons back in the late 70s, early 80s, and it was like 23% interest, and that was a good thing. That was a bargain. That was like, wow, this is great. Yeah. You know, if you bought a house, it was 15%. You were paying 15% interest, and that was good. That was good at that time. You know, so housing was small, very small. You didn't have the stuff and things that you had today that now you can't get because of the situation we're in. We lived through a time in the last 10 years where interest rates were basically zero. It was zero. Right. And so when you have opportunities like that where you're not paying interest, of course, it's going to supercharge things, and people can get bigger houses and they can get bigger things and fill them with more stuff. But eventually, as inflation kicks in, and folks, don't think that this was just a thing that just started. This has been happening, although it's been invisible for a long time, quote unquote. Or
I said, at least they were able to put the illusion on that.
Yeah,
that thing
but they can't. Once it got out of control,
right?
And things that okay, now we can't do it anymore. All right. But then you take a look at things like the homeless situation, right? It's exploding. That used to be able to be washed over, right? But now
like
you
I
have
said, this is another thing that
illegal
people
immigrants
see on a daily basis. Yeah, people see this on a daily basis. This is something that is undeniable, that is right there in your face.
Right. But then there's illegal immigrants, right? They're going and they're taking up what resources were available, because none of that was planned for. You know, if you're going to make immigration changes, you can do that. There's a pathway to it. It's called the legislative branch, and the legislative branch can make changes to the immigration laws. Now, if you don't make changes to the immigration laws, then you can't just ad hoc not choose to enforce them. You can't just open the doors and then expect all these communities, whether or not they show up in Texas or they get bused to Massachusetts or Chicago, it doesn't matter. These areas cannot absorb that without there being a serious budgetary crisis and or a lack of resources. Example of that was Thanksgiving. They ran out of turkey for the poor families because the migrants that were bused into New York City took them all. Now you have the minority communities here that are citizens that would be entitled to that, normally are playing second fiddle to people that are not a citizen. And look, you can say what you want about open borders, but in 1871, this country made a decision. And that decision was, we are going to incorporate. And when we incorporate, you become assets of the corporation. And that's where citizenship came. That's it. That's what we have. And it hasn't changed, right? So you have this influx of people that the system can't handle. Now it's starting to crack. And it was already cracking before that increased pressure, Scotty. So now it's all in our face. You can't you can't hide it anymore. Yeah. You can't afford a house if you want to buy one. They're priced out. But
they're still telling you that it isn't happening, and that if you
that's
imply
right.
or if you imply or say that it's happening, then hey, shut up racist, or shut up bigot, or whatever.
Yeah, but it's a little more systemic than that. It's a little more systemic than that, and let me tell you why. So this brings me full circle back to the baby boomers. So the baby boomers again, regardless of the stuff that they faced with the embargoes, the high interest rates, the high inflation, healthcare for the average worker was $2 a week, and that gave you 100% coverage, and you didn't have all of these unbelievable premiums. You didn't have pharmacy management companies. You were not getting absolutely ass raped to go see a doctor. And then when you went to see a doctor, at that time, the medical profession hadn't been totally dumbed down by Big Pharma and also controlled by Big Pharma. Now, that's not to say that you didn't have the salespeople that came in. Of course you did. My grandmother was a nurse, and I'll tell you what, I remember her having a closet full of all sorts of samples and pens and stuff and things and everything else, right? And it all came from the sales guy. But it wasn't, medicine was still being practiced. It wasn't throw a pill at this, throw a pill at that. People were trying to fix the problems, not treat the symptom. And now it became that because guess what? Doctors have to see a patient every 7 minutes if their practice is going to be profitable because of all the overhead that goes into that and the risk in the stuff and the things.
And another issue too, it was the mass closure of psychological facilities all across the United States, and the amount of people with mental illness that probably need to be put in some kind of a facility, for mental illness, are just kind of left to fend for themselves and wander around on the streets as well. And we used to have a psychological facility here called Menninger's, and they closed that down in the 90s. And you've seen that all over the United States, and people are like, well, these quote unquote asylums or psych ward places,
blah blah
they were
blah.
cruel,
Yes,
blah blah blah.
Yeah,
right. And that's why they closed them all down. But
and there was things that were done that were inappropriate. Absolutely.
Right. There were really horrible things that have happened in those facilities over the years. However, the answer was not to just completely shut them down and let people with that need to be monitored, right? I mean, you can't let some people just run around if they have a mental illness like that, right? If they just want to run around and harm people or whatever, they have to be put in some kind of a facility. It doesn't have to be prison.
There used to be resources for that, and then the resources dried up. Why? Because as government grows, it gets more expensive, but they can't just raise taxes all the time. They do, but it just becomes oppressive. So they look for ways to cut. They privatized, a lot of the hospitals prior to HMOs and all that were public. They were public hospitals, or they were like part of the Catholic medical system. They were church driven, charity driven, but they weren't really for profit. And it's when it became for profit, when medicine went for profit like that, that's when everything went downhill. But when I was raised, my dad only had to put $2 a week towards that, and everything was covered, right? So that is a huge, huge thing that didn't exist then, that did exist that doesn't exist now, where you're paying God knows how much a month for your premium, and then your co-pays or your co-insurance, or you didn't meet your deductible. And it's an unbelievable amount of pressure, that a lot of people just can't handle. And that's one of the biggest forms of, if not the biggest form of discharge for bankruptcy in the United States, is because of medical debt. So just think about that. Then there's credit. So as these prices have gone up, as this has just totally stretched people out to the max, and inflation, the worst thing you can feel when you're in that situation is to get that letter from the landlord that says your rent's going up, and then you get the electric bill and that's going through the roof. When reality, we have unbelievable resources here in the United States to where this shouldn't even be happening. Not for a second, you know, and we have the know-how and the expertise and the technology to be able to use all of those natural resources and do so in an environmentally responsible manner. To say anything otherwise is irresponsible and a lie. And so honestly, you have to look at why they push certain industries more than the others and then follow the money. And what you find is that all of this green stuff has been laid out early on. Gore goes and puts out his documentary, you know, in the early 2000s, basically saying the Arctic's going to be melted in 5 years and things like that. It never happened. But while he was doing that, he took all these resources and he devoted them to these renewable energy companies. And they focused on, you know, your solar power, your wind power, all those things that we see today that are being pushed on you. But there's technology out there, Scotty, that we can use that doesn't cost anything, that doesn't pollute, you know. And where is it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we have the ability to do that. And another funny thing is that if you look into a lot of the
Stop it.
I see you got a vocal
He's a
little kitty
bad
cat over
boy.
there.
He's a bad boy, that bad kitty. He's a bad boy.
Um,
And he likes to interject too, by the way, because he's not happy about what's going on.
right. Even he's
But
upset about all
and
this.
just
So
remember too,
if you,
Scotty, remember too, energy prices, although elevated, were not like they are today. And they weren't the burden that they are today
right.
on the American, you know, taxpayer, citizen, man
Well,
or
an
woman
interesting
trying to
thing is
survive.
that
Yeah.
if you look into a lot of the individuals that are behind a lot of these carbon credit um, schemes, that's what I'm going to call them, schemes or scams or whatever, because that's really all it is, you know, a couple of individuals, I believe, that are involved in formulating that whole carbon credit thing. These are the same people that ran Enron. So I want people to kind of think about that you know, when we're talking about carbon credits and the green tax or carbon tax and all of this you know, crap that, hey, your money's going to save you're offsetting your carbon footprint and that's somehow going to save the planet, right? You know, this is the same sort of mentality that you know, was brought to Enron, and we know what happened to Enron. So,
Right. But it's all being driven that way, right? So that's not,
mm-hmm.
it doesn't have to be that way, but that's where we're being led.
Right.
So to understand, there is so many more dynamics in play right now than there were back then. Think about this. And this is the other problem. You have a baby boomer generation that has really invested in the stock market like no other
Mm-hmm.
generation before or since. And their retirements, their way of life is really looking for those returns. So what did these places like BlackRock and other places do? They go into real estate and they buy up all the available housing to drive the prices up, to make a profit, to get those returns, to pay for the retirement of the baby boomers, right? Now that means that they had the available resources to do that, whereas the preceding generations don't. We don't have those resources. How the hell can you do that when you're paying so much for so many of the most basic human needs, you know? And you'd think by now humanity would be at a certain point where we'd get some things straight. Finally, you know, maybe we would just get something straight. No, we can't even get the basics. You know, and
But that's why, Joe.
this is bad.
That's why we need the AI to swoop in and fix everything. Because look, obviously we are completely incapable of it. So we need something of
me too. Me too. I feel that way too. Very incapable. Can't do it. No, but seriously, that is another problem in and of itself. That's a problem in and of itself. I want to bring up a article by Michael Snyder, who has written on this. He calls it, or uses the term that I see more prevalent now, silent depression. And the problem you have is the messaging runs totally counter to what you are experiencing, and that is what makes you feel isolated and alone. You see other people that are presenting an illusion of being okay, but let me tell you something. When the doors are closed, 62% of Americans are paycheck to paycheck, and you can't tell me that isn't stressful. You can't tell me that that's not stressful. So you have to understand that many people right now are suffering in a big way, like there hasn't been before. You used to be able to, and had disposable income to be able to have a rainy day fund. All of those things, very difficult to do now. Very difficult to do. And you also have to use real numbers. If you use real numbers and not the fake numbers they give you on TV, you wouldn't feel so alone. Believe me. So anyway, Michael Snyder writes, the Biden administration and the corporate media are telling us over and over that the economy's just fine, but the term silent depression has been going viral on TikTok. Housing, vehicles, food, and just about everything else that we spend money on is far more unaffordable today than it was during the Great Depression of the 1930s, that is. A retailer in Florida named Freddie Smith posted a video on TikTok with some absolutely startling numbers about the cost of living. And so basically he said, if you look back at the Great Depression, yes, you too, the house was only 3 times the average salary. Now it's 8 times the average salary. The car was 46% of the average salary. The car today is now 85% of that salary. And the crazy part, the rent was 16% of the average salary. Now it's 42% of the average salary. So of course you can feel that. It's enormous weight and enormous pressure. You know, I don't understand how people are surprised. Are they that disconnected with the reality of the bottom 80% that they don't get it? I mean, that's my point, is that they went through, a lot of these people that don't understand, most of them are older. They're baby boomers, right? And they don't understand it. You know, your Paul Krugmans and all that. They don't understand it because they had those resources when times were tough back then, you know, because you got paid a better wage relative. The dollar was worth more. You know, if you take a look at how much the dollar has depreciated since the Federal Reserve took over, I mean, it's what, 99%?
Right.
Of what it was in 1913. It's crazy. It's crazy. So yeah, this is bad. And he says that's why 62% of the country's living paycheck to paycheck. The cost of living has become so oppressive that you just can't deny it anymore. You're having a problem denying it because you can't maintain the facade. The low interest rates allowed us to have that facade. When the interest rates went up, and that's why you see the Federal Reserve now saying that they're going to do 3 rate cuts next year, because they can't do it anymore, because an $868 trillion military bill, the National Defense Authorization Act that was just signed, is dwarfed by the interest on the national debt. And that's just at a close to 6% interest rate on most treasuries, which is below the historical average. So you see, we're all in a big pickle. We're all in a big pickle. So, and then he says, when Whoopi Goldberg declared that millennials just need to work harder. I mean, are you effing serious, dude? We just need to work harder? let me tell you something. The people that are working pretty damn hard. But we have a historically low participation rate right now. Why is that? Why is 25% of able-bodied adults not working right now? Why do you think that is? What do you think?
Everyone we know personally is all in the same boat.
Right.
Some are doing a little bit better than others, but everyone's about in the same place.
Right.
And it's in over our heads.
Yeah,
Period.
yeah. Because it happened so damn fast, you couldn't respond fast enough to it. You know, not to mention the fact that, think about this, Scotty. Before, the baby boomer generation, the majority of it was really centered around the middle class and blue collar workers, right? And those factory workers and even municipal, like cops, firefighters, first responders, they got paid well. They got pensions. If you worked at a car plant, I mean, it was highly sought after. But the majority of people didn't really pursue 4-year university degrees, and instead they learned a trade. And then that trade, and it was basically fairly balanced throughout the whole spectrum of trades. So you had,
during that time, there were a lot of public works projects occurring all around the country. The highway system was still being built, right? And you had a lot of just expansion and growth going on. And so all of these people that were in the trades had jobs. There was plenty to do because there was tons of demand for that skilled labor in the trades, right? For whatever, welders, construction,
right. Well, also
engineer,
you also had
whatever.
less automation, right? So less automation meant
Right.
more manual processes.
More manual processes, more workers in the factories.
That's right.
So
and
on
now
and
you
so
don't
on.
have that. Now you don't have it because now you have a real big push for automation. Why? Because you can't get the profits anymore. Because you have basically tried to squeeze as much efficiency as you can out of manufacturing. And a lot of these places now have done so. And the only way they can get any more efficient is if they deploy AI, if they deploy your any sort of robotic automation to take out that human labor. So at the same time, though, when Generation X was coming about, the baby boomers wanted what would be better for their kids. So they had the resources to put their kids to school. And so they all pushed their children to do 4-year degrees. And so the market, basically you had in one generation, you saw it flip-flop to where you had more white-collar workers than you had blue-collar workers. You had more people that had 4-year degrees than you had people devoted to trades. And now that you've got that problem, now you've got tradesmen making twice the salary, sometimes 3 times the salary, than a 4-year engineer because there's so many damn engineers. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's really crazy. So there's a real interesting dynamic that is coming about here, and it's all converging at the same time. And the problem that you have is they can say what they want. They can cherry pick numbers or tell you how rosy it is, but they can't hide it anymore. And because they can't hide it anymore, they're mad. They're mad. They're mad. And it's being reflected in, and everybody knows it when you see what's on TV. You got Whoopi Goldberg, right? We just said that. Look at her. There she is, right? Millennials just need to work harder. She hasn't worked God knows how long, right? That's right. Many Americans are working as hard as they can, but they keep falling farther and farther behind. And we're just not supposed to talk about what's happening, see, because it's not appropriate. So we just pretend that everything just keeps going on as wonderful, Michael says. And it says, and now the corporate media has been putting out lots of articles attempting to debunk Smith's videos. So one example is any notion from TikTok that life was better in 1923 than it is now is divorced from reality, says Columbia Business School economic professor Brett House, who is a tenured professor who gets probably his own house on campus and a hefty salary, right? Hasn't probably worked a real job in his life. And what's the truth? Columbia Business School or the guy living life? What are you going to believe? And the problem is social media has made it so easy for people to put their lives out there for everybody to see. And you can see now the truth. You know, everybody's a citizen reporter with one of these, you know? Yeah, does it track us? Sure. But it's a tool as well. And a lot of people are utilizing them in so many different ways to show that what they're saying is not true at all. And
to compound on top of all of this as well is the amount of consumerist propaganda and, you know, the commercialization of society and the expectation that, you know, hey, you got to go buy this new product as soon as it comes out, you know, buy this, buy that, you know, and so
planned obsolescence. Yes, it's a hell of a freaking sales scheme. Absolutely.
And so not only do you have, you know, people that are living paycheck to paycheck, but they've also got this kind of conditioning that they need to buy all this crap that they really don't need. And, you know, it compounds the issue. You know, it's kind of like this long psychological game that has been played on us for a long time, and
no,
it just
absolutely
compounds the problem, you know.
So Michael asks, so what's the truth? Are we in a silent depression or not? So he says, let's look at 3 areas. If honest numbers are being used, they would show that GDP growth has been negative for almost the entire time that Joe Biden's been in the White House. And that would indicate that we're at least in a recession, right? Remember when he first got in?
Right.
About a year in, they were arguing what a recession was, the definition of a recession, because
they were trying to
it's ridiculous.
They
have redefined it. They have redefined it, but it doesn't matter. Everybody knows it because we're living it, right? So the honest numbers show that unemployment right now is about 25%. That's horrible. Okay, that's depressionary style horrible. And if that rate of inflation was still calculated the way it was back in 1980, so remember when I was talking about the 80s, and they did have inflation, 15%, where you had the interest rates jacked up to 25, but those were realer numbers, if you will, than what we use today. Today, it's all manipulated. It's all fake, and it's all dark, right? You don't get the right information. We don't get that. See, we're not privy to it. It's like George Carlin said, it's a small club and we're not in it, right? That's the way it is. So we have to use and come up with it ourselves. We got to figure it out ourselves. And when you do the numbers, it comes out to about 25%. So, and if the inflation rate was still calculated the way back in 1980, it would still be in the double-digit territory, even though it's come down a little bit. And remember, just because it's come down doesn't mean that prices are going to go down. They go up each time that invisible tax gets higher and higher and higher. But you don't have deflation. You know what you get when you talk and say the word deflation? Panic. They do not want deflation, even though in the short term, it would really, really help, right? Like, man, do we really have to pay this much for our effing gas bill or our electric bill? Is it really that? Does it have to be that high? Is there different ways we can do this? Maybe, do we have to be slaves to this antiquated system of power generation? Can we figure out a better way? I think we might be able to. And people are getting pissed off that they're working as hard as they are for shit. And that's really what it boils down to. We're working hard for shit. You know, wages have been stagnant. You don't get paid
people
a fair.
People are busting their ass with hardly anything to show for it.
That's
and
right.
It gets old and tiring after
and
a
then
while.
medical care is so expensive that people are breaking down. They can't go to the doctor. They can't afford to do it, you know, or for whatever reason. And what does it do? Oh, well, you know, if you're in pain, they won't give you medicine if you go to the doctor. Well, the street will do it. They don't ask questions. Oh, but then you
Right.
either die because you don't know what you're getting, you know, or you've created your own criminal element that the government machine can just gobble up anytime they want as low-hanging fruit to justify their budget for an increase next year, right? Do they go after the drug cartels? No, those are too hard. We're just going to feed off our own, you know, and at the same time, a little eugenics is good for a country, you know, so why don't we just kill off all these people that are weak, you know? That's really what it is, dude. It's a eugenics program. It's so much more. And people are hip to this now. So of course they're pissed, right? And that's how it is. So listen, it says the official numbers that the government gives are designed to make us feel good about things. But at this point, things are so bad, the charade's falling apart. Like I said, it's a silent depression. If you just got laid off from your job, it's a silent depression, right? You're not a silent depression, that's for sure, Ollie. It's a silent depression if you can't pay your bills. Think about that. Now listen to this. Millions of Americans strapped with student loan debt are still not paying their bills after a 3-year payment hiatus. Federal student loan payments started in October after President Biden declined to extend the pandemic-era pause. But 40%, 22 million borrowers at this point have not made a payment yet. That's right. That means about 9 million Americans who have payment due are not making them. That's crazy. But it goes on. It says, it feels like a silent depression if you can't sell your home. Home sales in California plunged to its lowest level in 15 years in November. According to a report on Tuesday, existing single-family homes were down 7.4% last month compared to October and down 5.8% from November 22. It was the biggest monthly decline in the past year, which plunged existing home sales in California to the lowest level since the Great Recession. And of course, this is mine. This is the one that I think has been glossed over for too long by a social safety net that we can't afford. And it shows in the numbers, $34 trillion debt, right? Yes, wars were part of that, but a lot of it is a social safety net that needs serious reform. And it said homelessness shot up by 12% this year. That's a huge number. 653,104. I will bet you dollars to donuts that number's higher.
Oh, that number is probably way higher than that.
Right. And that number represents the sharpest increase in largest unhoused population since the federal government began tallying those totals in 2007. So, if the economy's in good shape, Michael says, why are Americans becoming homeless at the fastest pace ever recorded? Doesn't make any sense. But those at the top of the economic food chain simply don't understand what all the fuss is about. See, because today Americans age 70 or older now hold more than 30% of the nation's wealth. And for a moment, life's good for the elite. And they think that the rest of us just need to work harder. So, of course, they're looking down our noses and
Stop complaining, you young
stop it, you snippers! Yeah, you
just need to get out there and work a little harder.
You gotta get a little more elbow grease in that shit. Yeah, that's not what it's all about, and we all know it. And the problem is, as long as we continue the facade that everything's okay, you're going to continue to feel isolated. You're going to go home. You're going to be stressed out. You're going to be doing a lot of darkness. We'll just put it that way. Or perhaps we can change things a little bit. And the best way to change things is to not participate. It's really that simple. We just don't participate. Could you imagine if everybody just decided, you know what? I'm not going to pay my electric bill. Not going to do it. Eat it.
Right.
Are you going to shut off all Americans electric? You're not. You know what'll happen? The government will intervene. Something will happen. They'll nationalize it. But something will happen. They'll react. They'll do something. Same with gas. You know what? I'm not going to pay my gas bill this month. If everybody did that and it was coordinated, they would change it. They would lower the rates. It would be very simple. You don't have to be violent. Just don't participate.
And that's why they keep people divided, right? That way people can't organize and do things like that. When the color of your skin doesn't matter when everybody's participating in a nationwide F you, I'm not going to pay my bill sort of action. But when you keep people divided on petty issues and stupid crap, you're never going to get them to come together or agree on.
I hate to say the word organize. I hate to say the word organize, but that's really kind of what it is it just coming together. And the reason why they need to keep pushing that narrative.
Well, when a population sees through the BS, they eventually are like, you know what?
But that's that's a
collective
very touchy
FU.
Subject. It's a touchy subject. When people can't pay their electric bills, when people can't buy groceries, when they can't do the most basic things, right? The hell with I can't go to the movies anymore. I haven't been to the movies in I don't know how long. Right. It's ridiculous. But if they can't go to a restaurant like a McDonald's, right? That's not even quality shit.
Right.
And they're paying $20 a meal, $15-20 a meal for two people, $24. What? McDonald's? You think that price is ever going to go down? Of course it's not. See, once that inflation's there, it's like taxes. Once they're there, they never go away. That inflation is there to stay. So when we look at the housing market,
I don't think I can ever remember a time that the value of the dollar went back the other way.
I can think of a few things. I can think of a few things with technology, right? If you remember, right. Say for example, telephones, like a rotary phone. The standard rotary phone was about $25 in 1980. And if you bought one, if you still had a push button telephone, house line phone, you could go to Walmart right now and get that same phone for like $7.99. You know what I mean? Because there's different dynamics there. That phone was probably made in America or Japan back then. Whereas today, China, slave labor, slave wages, you have it shipped in, cheap, done. Free trade agreements, they weren't there back then. You had tariffs on all of the imports coming in. So things were a lot more expensive. And there wasn't as much or as many things. It was a simpler life. Whereas now you have gimmicks and things and cards and stuff and hobbies galore that didn't exist because times have changed and technology is advanced. Computers are there now. It's huge. And that's what's led to a lot of the awakening that we see. But what it's also done is it's created a dynamic that, quite frankly, is going to cause some issues here in the near future, and right now, really, we're caught with our pants down. We really, truly are. And they're trying every which way to gloss it over. And there's just no way you can gloss this over. You can't make the numbers look good because no one believes it. Go to an open house. If you want to try to buy a house right now, your jaw dropped to the floor.
People are pissed.
Housing should never be that expensive relative to what your wage is. You know what I mean? But it's that way. Why? because the baby boomers' retirement funds depend on it. They depend on it. All the powers that shouldn't be, they depend on it. Because that's where the money was. That's where they were getting the returns. That's why the markets exploded. That's why the inventories are gone. You know? So now guys like us, you know, I want to go buy a house. I can't. It's out of my, I can't do it. Now we're going to have lifelong renters. You know, eventually you're just going to all be assigned housing. Private property is going to be a thing of the past, and it's going to be sooner rather than later. This is because they're creating the crisis. They're creating the event. You know, I saw this thing on, let me, it's kind of not, it's topic-y, but kind of not so much, but it's relevant. It's relevant. And I saw it earlier and I thought, man, is this like a precursor of things to come? And just how embedded are these operatives, if you will. And I'm talking about mass migration. So you can say what you want. I'm a humanity guy, right? I don't think that with our technology and our know-how, anybody should be suffering or starving at this point. But no one really knows how to do it in such a fashion that you don't have these control freaks just wrecking everything. So we got a problem. But that mass migration, that destabilization in certain areas has allowed countries like Iran, who are just, remember, they're just a pawn on the chessboard, just like us. So they're controlled just like us. And they're doing their part. But what's their part? Their part is to put people all over the world to be activated at certain times and do certain things. And right now they're threatening to close the Mediterranean Sea because of U.S. crimes in Gaza. And I hate to say it, you know, if you look at history, and we went over it a few weeks ago, the Balfour agreements really are what set all this off. And it was a long time ago. And it was done so by the control freaks. And the Rothschild family to this day still has it on their family website and touts it as one of the biggest successes they've ever had. You know, to bring about the second nation state of Israel. That really, in all honesty, should never have existed. But now that it's here and it's there, you just can't do that. So you have to have some way to work this situation out. But we seem to just can't get things right. We can't say, hey, you know what? Let's just stay out of this. This would be great. Why? Because we have these treaties. Just like World War I, we were stupid. We got into all these treaties again, and now we have to if they do this, well, we do that, and this and that, and we attack. It's crap. You know, the founding fathers said, ally with none, trade with all. And there's a reason for it. Because even back then, treaties were a very complicated thing. And we have set ourselves
right, because
back.
You know, the founding fathers realized, the founding fathers realized that, first of all, you know, they were from Europe. They understood how Europe operated, and for as long as anybody could remember in Europe, all wars, you know, devolved into, you know, these major conflicts in Europe, because there was always a country that was like, well, I have your back, and then another country was like, well, I have your back, and the next thing you know, you have like 3 or 4 different countries fighting with each other, when it, you know, originally just started between 2 of them, and
all those resources and all those lives for what?
Right.
For a treaty,
and so the founding fathers were like, no, we're not going. Yeah, the founding fathers were like, no, we're not going to have entangling alliances with other countries because we know what this does. If they get dragged into something, then we're obligated to get dragged in as well.
That's right.
And all we're going to do is build up our economic power through trading with everybody in a neutral sort of stance, right? If you
That
want to
was
deal
the
with us, we'll
idea.
deal with you. Yeah, yeah. If you
Yeah,
want to
that
deal
was
with
the
us, we'll
idea.
deal with
But
you. And yeah,
the reality
and
is, and the reality is there are some times where there are state players that do things that infringe upon the rights of other sovereign nations. It happens.
right.
Believe me, it happens. So you can't be naive and say, well, you can't have a military, you can't do that. You have to have some sort of defense, right?
Of course.
But there are these things that we have done throughout history that have really altered the course of things. And we have intervened so many times in the affairs of other nations and have created so much blowback in the process that,
Yeah, I mean, we
this
became
is not surprising to me at all.
right. Right.
You
We,
know,
we we became the world's policeman when we did not need to be the world's policeman, and uh,
and at a
right.
cost that is just unimaginable. I mean, I just can't fathom why we sat by and spent all this money on these wars that we knew were false. And believe me, man, we've been warning about this for years and years and years, like a broken freaking record. And the only way they can keep on doing this is by our complicity. We are complicit if we're not being or voicing our dissent. And I hate to say it, we try January 6th. A lot of people tried. They tried, and you see what happened to them. And it's a damn shame that was allowed to happen. I kind of feel like there's going to be a reckoning when it comes to that, but it's going to be a way. There was a lot of people that had a lot, man, suffering on an imaginable scale just because of a government operation that you saw
Right.
unfold in real time. It's sick. It's absolutely sick. And think about this. Just think about this. If the government, if the CIA, if these players could do that to our own citizens, don't you think the Iranians or others that have really felt oppressed, slighted, given a raw deal over, send people over an open border and place themselves strategically all over a country, even the Mediterranean, over in Gibraltar, and then do something that would effectively close the Mediterranean, or do something, with a key word or something like that said that activates thousands upon thousands of cells and everything else in the United States to totally upend it. It's totally within the realm of possibility. And
No,
then
absolutely.
you have disease, right? Because we're not used to these germs, and we're seeing all these different viruses either manufactured or just mutated or otherwise because of the unbelievable, uncontrolled migration of populations. You have movements of people like there's never been before. And there is no system on the planet that can handle that kind of change that fast. And that's why these laws are in place. So it's very, very interesting that they can believe or they think that people aren't miserable, and they can't understand why. It's unbelievable,
Don't worry about it, Joe. Everything is just fine. The
Yeah.
TV said that everything is hunky dory. CNN told me that Bidenomics is working just great, and hey,
Well, there's another
we're
thing too.
doing just fine.
There's another. I watched a documentary this week, and it is going super mega viral. It's called The Great Taking. Zero Hedge promoted it earlier on in the week, and they are promoting it once again. And I would highly recommend people watch this documentary. It's based on a book. It's a new book. It's exploded. It says, "The control system is collapsing. The great taking looms as globalism's last gasp." Now, I've been saying this for the last 5 years. No, since 2016, actually, that eventually, the 401ks, any sort of investment, any sort of securities, they're coming for them because they won't be able to handle what's coming with their standard toolkit. No more. They've used it all up. They can't do it anymore. And in the last gasp to get them to where they want, no private property, nothing else, they're going to take everything that's in there, the 401ks, everything, because it's going to be that bad. It's going to be that bad. And
well, let's dig into this after the break, because I believe we are coming up on it here pretty soon.
We are, as a matter of fact. You know that? We are. Yes, we are. Yeah. As a matter of fact, it's 2 minutes to break. And when we come back, we will do just that. We're going to talk about that. We'll also get into a little Christmas lore. Or better yet, let's just talk about, we'll ask the question, what does God think about Christmas? We'll ask that. We'll ask that question.
Good question.
And then we'll get into AI and some of the new advances coming that'll make your damn jaws drop to the floor. It's nuts and it's crazy. And I want to also take a minute to please, I know everybody's struggling and times are tough, but if you can support KGRA, go to kgradb.com today, become a member, and you'll have access to all the archives and thousands of hours of unbelievable content, and support the great people at KGRA that give people the opportunity to do this on so many different platforms. So just huge, please support them today. So we're going to go to break. And when we come back, there'll be so much more unbelievable stuff here on the Freedom Link, kgradb.com. Don't go away.
Hey members, the new KGRA DB app is now available on iOS and Android devices. Gain on-demand access to any KGRA DB programming. Download any show directly to your mobile device to listen or watch on the go. Go to the App Store and search KGRA DB.
Did you know 75% of Americans are chronically dehydrated? If you struggle with focus, run low on energy, or when it's time to finally sleep, you simply can't, this can all be linked to dehydration, and Fuel Up has the answer. Our proprietary formula contains the finest cellular hydration with the strongest immune-enhancing natural ingredients. The Fuel Up system is made up of 3 different incredibly tasting varieties. Wake kickstarts your day with a jolt of caffeine. Play boosts focus while hydrating your cells. Rest not only helps you relax, but also rejuvenates your cells while you sleep. Here's what our clients have to say.
I really don't miss my coffee, and you can tell the difference.
So I'm going to take it for the energy. I'm going to take it for the play. I'm going to take it, all day.
And it works. That's the thing. It works. We love it.
Take the Fuel Up Challenge now, where we offer a feel the difference money back guarantee. Fuel Up for life.
You're listening to the KGRA Digital Broadcasting Network. We provide unparalleled coverage of trending news in the world of ufology, cryptozoology, and paranormal phenomenon. Whether you're watching our video live stream or listening to one of our audio programs, you are getting the best from world-renowned researchers and hosts, guiding you through topics the mainstream won't touch. Miss one of your favorite programs? No problem. Head over to the members area at kgradb.com for access to our massive library of award-winning content. Make contact, stay connected. Only at kgradb.com.
It's hour number 2, the Freedom Link. Yes, and we are going to continue, my friends, with our kind of talk on why everybody feels so isolated and alone. And it really doesn't have to be that way. You know, I think right now, community and fellowship and things like that are going to be pivotal in the days to come. And that we shouldn't be isolating ourselves like we are. Now, it comes with a lot of risk, because there's a lot of fear, because there should be really, and fear is a tool, meaning like never before have I seen society so broken, you know, where people just walk into stores and empty the shelves and walk right out. And, you know, if they get arrested, they get turned right around and it's not even a crime anymore. And it's just, it's like nuts. And I'm not a police state guy, you know, but things have gotten so out of hand. People are so desperate in so many ways that
this is what you see in a lot of countries prior to collapse, right?
Yeah,
where
very much
you
so.
have societal breakdown, and then you
the
just
demoralization.
You know, the police are just completely demoralized. They don't even really want to do their job. You know, and a lot of this goes back to what you were saying about how a lot of these people, you know, in these professions, they were getting actually paid a living wage. They were getting paid, and how much effort are you really going to put into your job when your
mind is going everywhere because you can't figure out where you're going to pay next and who,
right?
And
they're not even paying you what you're worth, you know, to do the job. So why should you put any effort into it?
But let me explain this too.
And yeah, I mean, it's
let
just
me
a
explain
total
the scam. So there's a scam though that's there, and that scam is a pretty important scam to understand. And so in 2015, the OECD, Jesus. It is the OECD. They basically do a lot of investigating into the economic conditions of all the UN nation states. And they oftentimes put, like, for example, they'll rank the schooling, right? So education among nations. That's one of the things they do. But they also look at the economic factors. And one of the things they did was they looked at, like, say, low wage workers in the United States. So in 2015, the average wage of a Walmart cashier was a little over $10 an hour, between $10 and $11 an hour. Now, if you took that job and you rewound the clock to 1955 from 2015, the average wage, when adjusted for inflation, for a cashier at a grocery like Kmart was $38 an hour. So you had $38 an hour of purchasing power.
Right.
Right?
Isn't that wild? That's wild. You know, when if people really don't understand how devastating inflation is.
It really is. But it gets worse.
And then when it applies to things at scale, right? Because inflation scales, you know, with the more cash there is to be devalued, that, you know, it's it can wipe out. It has wiped out a lot.
A lot of purchasing power, and that is what's crippling people right now.
Right.
So interestingly enough, there was a guy, and I can't remember his name. I'll get to it in here because he's the economist, the guy that worked on Wall Street, the guy that came up with the algorithms, exceptionally brilliant guy. And he went, and his whole modus operandi kind of coming up was to understand what he didn't understand. That was kind of like I know it sounds kind of like corny, but that's what it was. So he comes up with this model, and this model was very successful during the dot-com bubble when everybody else was going down. His model made money for the people that trusted him to manage their resources. And he would constantly be searching for any mode that would upend his model. He was always looking for that. That was his thing. And eventually, I guess he had an epiphany where he understood that the system was rigged, and he wanted to understand just how rigged it was. And that's what this documentary is really about, is it takes you through his career and the research that he did to get to where he's saying we're going to go. And where he says we're going to go is interesting because that follows. Now he's taken the follow the money path. Whereas I kind of went through the historical slant, legislative slant, foreign policy, the invisible war, that path. And what I saw was, while the Arab Spring was wreaking havoc on Northern Africa and parts of Europe, you also had at the same time a test going on in just how willing a population would be if a bank failure took place and they went and had a bail-in instead of a bail-out. And they did it, and they pulled it off, and it was Cyprus. And they know they can do it. And they've been talking a lot, these think tanks, about just how they can get more resources, because that's all it takes, guys, is more resources to throw at this problem. And I swear to you, this time it's going to fix it. Only this time, they're going to take the 30% of that wealth, or more, if you think about it. And I don't know the exact number of what's in 401ks today, but I can tell you it's more than $33 trillion. And that should scare everybody. So anyway, this person, let's see if I can find his name. David Rogers Webb. And it says, according to the great taking author David Rogers Webb, he says, in the olden days, you invested in a company, they gave you physical share certificates, and you were now a partner of that company. And he says, this is still how many value investors, including me, think of stock ownership when you own a stock. He says, we're not all invested in these companies simply because we're trying to time the oscillations in the price movement. We think ourselves as partial owners of these businesses. But that's not how it works, because they rewrote over the past 20 years the, what is it called? The Uniform Commercial Code, I think it's called. And in doing so, they've changed what it means when you buy a stock or a security and how it's handled. And it's really diabolical. And what it does in the grand scheme of things is, in the event of a problem, the too big to fail banks get all the resources. And it's nuts. And he calls it the great taking. And it's being set up now. And he shows you how it happens. So it's available on YouTube. I suggest everybody watch it, because it's an unbelievable explanation about the flow of money and what it's telling him based on his 30 plus years of experience in the industry. It's really something else. And it really is, it's a system rigged from top to bottom. As a matter of fact, Donald Jeffries over on Substack, he wrote a piece that I think is brilliant. It's super long. And I know, just so everybody knows, and you know, I've done this for years, is I read these articles because a lot of people, they listen to this audio, you know, while they're working, while they're doing things during the day, it doesn't matter. You can't watch it. But I do this because a lot of people don't have the time to read these things, and they're important. You know, these are extremely relevant viewpoints that are crucial to understand. Crucial to understand. So he writes, just the other day, New York Attorney General Lolita James issued a remarkable statement. She said, before this trial even began, the judge ruled in our favor and found that Donald Trump did engage in years of significant financial fraud. Now, she boasted about that publicly, and this is associated with just one of Donald Trump's legal cases, right? And quite frankly, folks, they're absurd, right? They're laughable. But what's even more laughable, says Donald, is biased prosecutors said, it was what they said in the moment, right? She admitted that the honorable judge had ruled in our favor before the case had even gone to trial. Even for this collapsing banana republic, it's a shocking precedent to openly brag about such serious breaches of basic legal protocol. So James, whom Trump has called racist, recently stated, the Donald Trump show is over. James has referred to Trump as an illegitimate president and says his days are numbered. She's lashed at Trump's allies, even declaring we'll bring them down too. And upon being elected in December 2018, James vowed that she would use every area of the law to investigate President Trump and his business transactions and that of his family as well. In this case, Trump is accused of exaggerating the value of his assets. Now, he says, I've known a lot of people in my lifetime that's exaggerated the value of whatever they've had. Bullshitters, I believe they called, or to be more polite, blowhards. Until now, being a bullshit artist wasn't a criminal offense. The good judge in this case, Arthur Engoron, is about as biased as can be and a perfect example of the new judges who rule over the Orwellian courtrooms that we have now. So, Engoron slapped a gag order on the former president after he insulted his law clerk on Truth Social. And some insults are more equal than others. You know, Trump also received a gag order in his equally ridiculous trial for conspiring to overthrow the 2020 election by complaining about the irregularities and the cheating. Right?
That actually happened.
Yeah, but you can't have the truth, right? So Jack Smith, the prosecutor in the case with Trump, is being tried for alleging electoral fraud, right? Something which Stacey Abrams, by the way, continues to do in the same state, is a category by itself. You just can't fathom. I mean, you love him, you hate him, you're indifferent about him. You can't deny the assault on the poor guy. And right. I say that because you can be rich all day, but money doesn't buy you happiness. And I have to imagine that just playing golf every day, but having all this shit weigh in on you, it can't feel good. It can't feel good, you know, especially when you understand Trump's upbringing, you understand who his father was. You don't understand how this is probably affecting him up here mentally and how hard it is. So I find it very interesting. Now, just as the lethargic American public permitted tyranny to be constructed all around them without protesting or even noticing, they've allowed the implementation of a politicized justice system. The prosecutions of Roger Stone, of Paul Manafort, Michael Flynn, Sidney Powell, and others. Crazy. Peter Navarro, he was convicted of contempt of Congress because he didn't show up. He ignored it. And you know what? The same thing to Hunter. I think Hunter did that last week, right? Didn't show up.
Yeah, he didn't show up.
Attorney
So where's his?
Remember the gun running program they had going over the border? He didn't.
Yeah.
Didn't show up for it. Some subpoenas you see are more equal than others. Yeah. So Donald writes, he says, I'm just a community college dropout, but I don't know that either congressional subpoenas are legally required to be responded to or that they aren't any big deal. You know, the January 6th defendants, those who are still languishing in prison nearly 2 years later, denied all due process, being given draconian sentences. Some will spend more years in prison than murderers do. And that hasn't been a single concern of any civil libertarian. Haven't seen it, you know? Are there any civil libertarians left? I don't know. I find it.
Yeah, where's that whole faction of the
what happened? You know, I'll tell you what.
Libertarian movement.
I'm going to tell you what happened. What happened was Ron Paul, the last time he ran, he was kicking everybody's ass. Hands down, was kicking everybody's ass. He goes into Iowa, and they stole the election in real time right from him.
Yeah, they screwed him in Iowa.
They stole it right from him, and they did it in broad daylight. And they said, "I'm sorry, but you can't be president." And ever since then, the libertarian, all the Ron Paul revolution, all of it, they threw our hands up because everybody supported that system. That, well, you know, what are we supposed to do? Jesus Christ. What are we supposed to do? Ay, ay, ay. So, yeah, it's a big problem. It's a rigged system. And I would suggest you go to Substack, look up Donald Jeffries, and read the rest of his article. I protest. Because he's right. It's a rigged system. Look at the economic data we've been fed. Why aren't people happier? Look at the court system that persecutes anybody that doesn't toe the line, that doesn't go along with the Orwellian, woke, DEI crowd. You're totally freaking ostracized. And all your assets stolen. I mean, Rudy Giuliani's about as crooked as they get. But let me tell you something. The kind of crap that's going on with him when you know that there was fraud, you know, but not even allowed to present evidence in court. So what do you do when you need help? And I've asked this a million times, but you can't get it. Are you just going to just keep going the way it is? Well, it doesn't affect me. Or do we just do something about it? It's kind of interesting. There is a case study going on about people doing something about it, you know, and that's Argentina. Argentina right now is doing a Ron Paul. He's doing exactly what Ron Paul.
I am very invested into seeing how Argentina ends up because this is going to be an amazing experiment for them, I think.
And Ron Paul said it. He said, you know, when you embark on the change that's sorely needed, it's going to suck for like the first year or two. It's going to be really bad.
And this guy from Argentina, he's told the population, he told them, hey, this is
brace
gonna
yourself.
Suck.
This is going to suck. Yourself.
It's going to suck for a little bit, but after, you know, afterwards, things are going to be on the upward trend. And because you've got to completely realign that system. You've got to completely change the paradigm of how they're running things there. And in doing so, I mean, yeah, it's going to be hard in the short term, but in the long term, I think this could really bring Argentina back to its, former glory, if you will, because they used to be one of the richest nations on the planet, right?
Yes, they were. They were the richest nation on the planet at one point in time. And they've really fallen big time. But listen to this, seriously. Under Argentina's new president, Fuel's up 60%. Diaper prices have doubled. Zucchini, they put in salad. This is a restaurant owner at a hip wine bar in Buenos Aires, right? It says price of beef soared 73%. Zucchini, 140%. Uber drivers paid 60% more to fill their tank. And a father said he spent twice as much on diapers for his toddlers than he did last month. Why? And the reason why is because one of the first things he did was to devalue the peso. And he had to do that because it was being artificially propped up by a bunch of money printing and a really complex system of subsidies and things like that and taxes that just could not continue because they had no money. They were bankrupt, literally could not pay their debt come April.
It was like artificially boosting the currency.
Like a Ponzi scheme, basically, on a large scale.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So Javier Milei, he's elected. The country was already suffering, right? Third highest rate of inflation in the world. Prices are up 160% year over year. Now, since he took office, it says on December 10th, quickly devalued the Argentine currencies. Prices soared at such a dizzying pace that many in the South American country of 46 million are running new calculations on how their businesses or households can survive the far deeper economic crunch that now is going to happen. And he said this. He says, look, this is going to be terribly painful, but it's something that has to happen. And if we get through this in one piece, and he's even telling them, we might not make it. I don't know. But if we get through this in one piece and you guys help me out, we're going to be okay on the other side. And that's exactly the message that Ron Paul said, when we go ahead and we start peeling away all of these departments, these government departments that should never, ever have existed in the first place, if you go by the law, and you get rid of all that bloat, it's going to hurt exceptionally bad for the first year or two, but it'll start to get better, and it will get better. So this is something that everybody should be watching, because this is what Ron Paul was always talking about, getting rid of all of the stuff that we don't need and having faith in a free market. And that's not to say that shenanigans don't happen. Of course they do. They're always going to happen.
It's like cutting out a tumor, right? It's going to hurt. It's going to,
you've got to reduce the size of government. It's Rome. It's Rome at its collapse. We are being crushed just by our own weight, under our own weight. And you have to shed that weight. We're like, it's our 600-pound life, only it's the United States. What do? You have to stop eating. You gotta start managing your diet. You gotta exercise. You gotta be more efficient. Good. I'll tell you what. I just saw a staggering number. And I think it was the Social Security Administration or something like that. 7% of the people at Social Security or whatever have returned to the office. 7 of their office in DC. 7%. Do you think they're being as productive at home as they're being at the office? No. Do you think that you're getting the bang for your buck? You weren't before when they went to the office, but now it's that much worse. It's that much worse. So what do you do when you have 3+ million people that don't even come to work every day, that are running this country? I'm sorry, man. It's an unbelievable issue that we face. So really what it all boils down to is we have to really focus in now on the true things. The true things. And that is what will help us through all this. So the first thing is, don't listen to these talking heads that call you crazy for feeling the pressure that truly exists. Also, don't feel like a failure, because you're not. You're not a failure. And just because you can't live up to what you saw or grew up with or what your parents had or grandparents had is no measure of your success, of your well-being, of anything else. We're in a shit situation right now, and we're all together, but they're isolating us all from each other. And they're doing so by these very targeted campaigns. Google's, the ISPs, all of it, they all do it. They're all controlling the stream that goes to each individual person. Yes, they have that technology, and it's only going to get worse. That's why community is so important, you know. But when it comes to truth, there's something that I read every year, and I just find it so relevant. And it's one of the reasons why my wife and I decided years ago to ditch these crazy holidays, because they're apostate in the first place. But what's even worse is they have been totally hijacked and are a source of tremendous stress, frustration, disappointment. And it can all go away tomorrow. And you could still have twinkle lights. You could still have parties and all that stuff. But do we need to have all the BS associated with these holidays? So the question is, does God celebrate Christmas? And it kind of goes like this. And this is on BibleStudy.org. And I found this fascinating. And I still go to this every year. Does God celebrate the birth of Jesus on Christmas? What do you think of the holiday? Or what do you think he thinks of the holiday? Many people are aware that popular holidays such as Easter and Halloween and Christmas are not in the Bible. And, you know, they're actually pagan. But to many, however, such facts and what God thinks doesn't really matter. After all, they believe that they don't celebrate the holiday like the ancient pagans, right? Because as long as Jesus' birth is rejoiced over at Christmas with a little sprinkle of Santa Claus, and, you know, the kids are all happy and gay and stuff. And it's assumed that, well, God will understand because, you know, Jesus is the reason for the season, right? So did anyone in the New Testament ever celebrate the birth of Christ on Christmas? The biblical record is silent in that regard, yet people reason that God must accept the holiday because we just have such good feelings about it. And we cherish these fond memories of the holiday. So he must have the fond memories as well, right? I mean, he did make us in his image. But does he? What if the memories of God concerning Christmas included the noise of pagans who rejoiced over their idol while chanting, screaming and all this stuff, and his spiritual children known as Christians were being put to death? The Bible says God hears the voices of those martyred for his name, crying under a heavenly altar, asking that their deaths be avenged. The following is a fictional story that'll help explain some of the issues involved with the holidays such as Christmas that are not condoned by God. So imagine if you were in Germany at the height of Nazism in 1937. Churches throughout the country are in trouble. Young people who go to church want to leave and join the Hitler Youth, and businesses that even seem to be Jewish because they observe the seventh-day Sabbath are failing. Some ministers, however, believe that if they just make some minor changes here and there to how their church operates, they'll be able to survive what's happening in the country. So on April 20th each year, it's Hitler's birthday. And many people there joyously celebrate. And since it's unclear exactly when Christ was born, some religious leaders choose April 20th as the time to commemorate his birth. And they also figure out that if they take the cross and they add just a few bends to it, it looks surprisingly similar to a swastika. So with changes to the church comes growing numbers, and people soon find themselves holding their right arms rigid in front of them at an upward angle so that they can show as they march that they're giving God glory around the cross. And most people don't care that the commemoration of Jesus' resurrection has been moved to occur on the exact day when the glorious Third Reich started. Churches which adopt the new way in Germany operate and thrive, while others are persecuted and even killed. The new practices are even so popular that many years later, many people are still found celebrating the birth of Jesus on the 20th of April. One day, someone visits the church and does his best to try to inform the group that how the holidays originated. And after hearing the explanation, the people aren't shocked at all. After all, in their minds, the terms like Hitler and Nazi, those are meaningless. I mean, who cares, they think, of how people many years ago worshiped whatever they thought was the eternal. I mean, what matters is what they do today is for the worship and glory of him. So their trips down memory lane are abruptly interrupted when the person asks what Christmas memories God has. You know, how do you think God would react if people decided to yearly commemorate his son's birth on the birthday of Hitler? Wouldn't most want to find out how their customs honoring God and his son got started? You know, our fictionalized tale of the 20th of Christmas, of April, seems wonderful and magical. It's filled with warm and loving feelings and memories. And all these feelings, however, are based on lies. The Christmas spirit to them is the spirit of sharing and giving to others. Anyone who would dare be opposed to that, such widely accepted practice, there must be something terribly wrong with them, of course. You know, the allure and temptation to set aside Christmas on April 20th with its lights and its music and its festivities enjoyed by those who know nothing of the Creator would be most powerful. So, to the early New Testament church, the perfect will of God did not mean that they could set up their own holidays like Christmas. Many years later, however, the Catholics, and no doubt others, deceived the masses into believing that they could hang on to their pagan traditions of worship, but just rename them. You know, and the problem is, Jesus warned in no uncertain terms that there would be those who worship him in vain. People don't understand the trappings of this and why you don't get light from darkness. Just remember that. If something is deceptive or dark, it doesn't derive light. It's just that simple. So look at what this holiday means to so many people. You've got 1 in 3 people going into debt when they already can't afford basic living. They're going into further debt to buy gifts to put under a tree that they can't afford. Right? And how many people
if they feel they can't do that, it makes them feel worthless and like they've failed as a person.
Because they have warm feelings of when they grew up and they had that stuff. Well, when their parents had a lot more disposable income and things like that. Yeah, sure you did. And of course that brings about what? Disappointment. It brings about depression. It is one of the highest rates of suicide is on Christmas and the day after Christmas. One of the highest rates of suicide. Do you think that's all merry and joyful and things like that? This is the issue. You know, you can call it religious or not. I don't care what you call it. I call it the truth. And the truth is you can tell when something comes from light and when something doesn't. And when something causes that much pain and that much stress and that much anguish and that much pressure and everything else, sorry, dudes, it's not worth it. And you need to cast it off. Just cast it off. You know, you can have these moments and memories without the bullshit.
Right.
That's all.
Right. Exactly. I mean, and so much of it has, you know, nothing to do with anything, right? And,
I was at Dollar General today, Scotty. I was at Dollar General today. Guess what they were doing? Guess. They were putting out the freaking Valentine's Day candy.
Oh, wow.
Dude, it's December 23rd.
Right. So, I mean, it just shows how much of this has revolved around what I said earlier, the commercialization and the brainwashing and advertising that the population has been subjected to over the past, 70 years or so, or, you know, since the end of World War II, pretty much. It's, you know, consume, buy, and, you know, whereas you had the Catholics, wrapping in pagan stuff into all of this. Now you have consumerist propaganda and all of that also folded into the mix, and so you have this amalgamation, this chimera of like ancient pagan worship with an overlay of consumerist greed and whatnot, and
and then keeping up with the
terrible,
Joneses and the bullshit like
right,
that,
keeping
right?
up, yes, that whole aspect, and
And it doesn't need to happen.
leads to
It doesn't need to
right.
happen. Break away from it. Now, I will tell you this: doing so will be exceptionally painful, and it will be because
Right.
your families are not going to get it right away. They just won't. But I promise you, they will, especially if they're
And
suffering
look,
right
we're
alongside with you.
we're all free individuals. If you choose to,
Who
if
cares?
you,
I'm
who
just saying,
cares,
don't put the
whatever,
stress on yourself. It's
Right. Don't put,
crazy.
yeah, don't put the stress on yourself, and don't feel like you're obligated, to do this. And there's other ways of,
How about you serve your fellow
s-
man or something like that?
yeah, serve
Instead
your
of
fellow
putting
man,
gifts under the trees, go down to the soup kitchen and serve a meal to them, or something like
spend
that.
time with your family, and just do the quality things that are good for you, and don't
That's right.
feel like you have to put yourself in debt or anything like that in order
not.
to appease others, because if people truly love you, they don't care about the gifts. You know
No.
what I mean? And right. So
No, well taken. Good point, man. Good point. And so that's my Christmas message to all you. Merry Krampus. I want to get into some science news now, because this also is going to lead into some really interesting things. There's a lot of talk going on now about universal basic income. And you're going to start to see that more and more as human labor becomes more and more obsolete, and more people drop out of the workforce. More and more people are not participating, and it's causing everything from shortages. And then you have the geopolitical instability that's all doesn't need to be there, but it is, because, we went over that in hour one. You're going to have more and more pressure to advance AI faster and faster. And the thing is, it's already going at a speed that humanity cannot sustain. And it's because it all goes back to what I've said a million times. What has been seen cannot be unseen. Once it's out there in human consciousness, dude, it's there. It is there, and it's not going away. No different than, like, say, carjacking. That stuff didn't happen 50 years ago, but the first time it happened, it spread like wildfire. And it happens today. And now you couple that with a weak system of, I don't want to say enforcement, but when somebody's been harmed, it used to be no victim,
a weak
no
system
crime,
of justice,
right? If
should
you
say.
weren't a victim,
Yeah,
if you
something
weren't
like that.
harmed, there was no crime. And then things became administrative, right? Now we have administrative things. And we put up with that shit, and it got abused to the point where people got pissed. And what did they do? They swung the pendulum so far the other way that it pissed people off now. So now you've got the classic Hegelian dialectic going on that says we need to swing the pendulum back. And when it does, it's going to go too far again. And that's where you're going to see a lot of the removal of private property and the institution of an AI managed lifestyle and society, and all revolving around universal basic income, and everybody not owning a single thing. So one of the things that are out there is science news. I'll put this up on the screen. This is a very interesting thing. So it's meet co-scientist, your AI lab partner. Now, this is a paper cycling around the science circles right now. National Science Foundation, an artificial intelligence-driven system has autonomously learned about certain Nobel Prize-winning chemical reactions and designed a successful laboratory procedure to make them. The AI did it in a few minutes, and was correct on its first attempt. And according to the authors, this is the first time that a non-organic intelligence planned, designed, and executed this complex reaction that was invented by humans. So, it did it in a few minutes. This would normally take humans months, if not years, to do. It did it in minutes. It said in less time than it would take you to read this article, an artificial intelligence-driven system was able to autonomously learn about a certain chemical reaction, Nobel Prize winning, and design a successful laboratory procedure to make them. And the AI did it in just a few minutes and nailed it on the first try. It says the most complex reaction co-scientists pulled off are known in organic chemistry as palladium catalyzed cross couplings, which earned its human inventors the 2010 Nobel Prize for Chemistry. So this demonstrated the ability of co-scientists to show the potential for humans to productively use AI to increase the pace and number of scientific discoveries. Do you realize the order of magnitude? You're talking in speed and incremental advancement?
So, my dad was telling me about this video that he saw, and it was a guy who was, I believe he was studying to get his PhD or something in chemistry, right?
Yeah.
But he also liked to dabble in AI and toying around with it on the side, right? And he trained this AI to start developing chemical weapons.
Oh, excellent.
And what ended up happening, which terrified him, is it spat back the result of 7 brand new, never before seen chemical compounds that could be used as chemical weapons. And he was like, oh,
shite.
Okay. Wow, So
Yeah.
when you're talking about this co-scientist doing these chemistry, Nobel Prize winning chemistry reactions and things like that, it makes me wonder, what is the military using this AI for? What are their version of co-scientists and pouring through chemicals and bioweapons and things of that nature, where it may take years and years worth of research and development, with all these people in, lab suits, clean rooms, underground facilities, when you can just feed the data into an AI supercomputer, and this thing will spit out the compound, and not only spit out the compound, it'll tell you exactly what you need to do to create the compound, step by step. So
what they did, I want to get, so people understand just what I'm saying here, and just how, when I say, like, the scale of this is I can't even wrap my arms or head around it. So what they did was they took like ChatGPT and like other large language models, and they tried to split all possible tasks, it says, in science into small pieces, and then piece by piece construct the bigger picture. And in the end, we brought everything together. He says the software modules allow co-scientists to do things that all research chemists do. Listen, search public information about chemical compounds, find and read technical manuals on how to control robotic lab equipment, write computer code to carry out the experiments, and analyze resulting data to determine what worked and what didn't. And then you have to go back and you have to repeat, and you go back and you repeat, and you go back until you repeat until you get that process right. And you're not getting it right on the first go. There's always improvements. You always find it. So one test examined co-scientists' ability to accurately plan chemical procedures that, if carried out, would result in commonly used substances such as aspirin, acetaminophen, or ibuprofen. So the large language models were individually tested and compared, including 2 versions of GPT with software modules allowing it to use Google to search the internet for information as a human chemist might. The resulting procedures were then examined, and scores based on if they would have led to the desired substance, and how detailed the steps were. And some of the highest scores were notched by GPT-4. So what did that do? They observed co-scientists demonstrating chemical reasoning, which is described as the ability to use chemistry-related information and previously acquired knowledge to guide one's actions. It used publicly available information encoded in the SMILES format, Simplified Molecular Input Line Entry System, a type of machine-readable notation represented basically the chemical structure of molecules. And that's what they did. They ran this thing, and now it's bringing the robots, because now you can have these models finding all sorts of new compounds and things. Let me give you an example. It gets even scarier. But not. If you see what I'm saying, it's like, and Phys.org nailed it on this one. They asked, and the researchers are asking the right question. And I don't know. I gotta, you want to have faith in humanity on this one, but I don't. I just see it ending very badly. And I never even thought of the bad things yet that you could do with this stuff, but just seeing how something simple like this could be taken advantage of really goes to show you how dangerous this is for humanity in so many different ways, and we're not preparing ourselves for it. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be, but it's going to be, because we can't control it, because the genie's out of the bottle. Check this out. New AI model can predict human lifespan. And it's so gosh darn accurate that they want to make sure it's used for good purposes and not for bad. Think about that. If you knew when somebody was going to die, I mean, you could make bets on it. You could start a whole, I mean, the unbelievable things that could happen if you knew when somebody was going to kick the bucket, or if they had some sort of health thing or something that you could take advantage of. Anything. It says researchers have created an artificial intelligence tool that uses sequences of life events such as health history, education, job, and income to predict everything from a person's personality to their own mortality by built using transformer models, which power large language models like ChatGPT. The new tool, Life2Vec, is trained on a data set pulled from the entire population of Denmark, 6 million people. Almost like the sentient simulation. Remember that, Scotty?
Right. Where it has everybody as a node in the simulation.
On the planet.
And
yeah.
On the planet, right, yeah.
So the data was only made available to researchers of the Danish government. The tool the researchers built based on a complex set of data is capable of predicting the future, including the lifespan of individuals, with an accuracy that exceeds state-of-the-art models. But despite its predictive power, the team behind the research said it's best used as the foundation for future work and not an end in and of itself. Even though we're using prediction to evaluate how good these models are, the tool shouldn't be used for prediction on real people. Right. It's a prediction model based on specific data sets of a specific population. That's what we're saying. But you know what this means? This means it can. This is what they're telling you, that they're trying to word it in such a fashion that makes you go,
I wonder,
but it's not.
I wonder how they determined that this thing was that accurate, right? Did they have a bunch of like older people that were kind of close to the end come in and feed it data or whatever, and then like see if like when these people eventually did pass, if it nailed it on the right day or close to the right time or something. I wonder how they actually like verify that this thing was like predicting how long someone lives,
Check it out. At the heart of Life to Vec is the massive data set that researchers use to train their model. The data is held by Statistics Denmark, the central authority on Danish statistics, and although tightly regulated, can be accessed by some members of the public, including researchers. The reason it's so tightly controlled is it includes detailed registries of every Danish citizen. And the main element and elements that make up a life are spelled out in that data, from health factors, because remember, national health care, education, it's all public, and income, it's all there. So the researchers use that data to create long patterns of recurring life events to feed into their model. Taking the transformer model approach, using the large language models on language and adapting it to human life, represented as a sequence of events. And so they did that, and they figured out one of the life events that the researchers predicted was a person's probability of mortality. This is on an individual level based on it running this millions of times over, right? On all these individual people, to where it could go and say with an absolute certainty almost exactly what and when and how this person's going to die and things like that. But what it couldn't really, of course, it can't account for is accidental death, because it can't really foresee that. But what it can see is that perhaps you're at an elevated risk because of perhaps the job you're in, or maybe the area you live or something like that, So there's different factors to it. But the paper
it doesn't predict like exactly when. It just predicts more of a percentage risk factor.
If things were to be status quo,
like you're in a higher level of risk based off of what was fed into the data.
What was so crazy about it all, Scotty, was that it was just on point. And so what these people were saying is, I don't know exactly how far we want to let this go because of the purposes it could be used for, which, it just tells me, but the government's that's okay. I get it.
Think about what would happen if the insurance companies had the ability to access something like that, or the power of something like that, or anything,
and then not tell anybody. I bet you they do. I'll bet you they have it. No, I'm serious, dude. I'll bet you they have. With AI now, you're telling me they're not using that stuff? I mean, the only thing, and again, they couldn't foresee COVID. And they couldn't foresee the problems after COVID, which is why they are really eating shit right now, because more people our age and younger are dying, and they didn't account for that. Their models didn't account for that. Nobody's models accounted for that, except the people that designed the damn disease. Their models.
And on that happy holiday note to leave it on, we are going to be coming up to the end of the show here.
Oh my gosh.
2 minutes.
Holy moly.
But hey, always gotta, depend on Joe to bring us that holiday.
Yes. And remember everybody, just, hey, let it go. Hey, just sing it. Let it go.
Right.
Come on, everybody. Just
let it go.
That's right.
Yes, don't do anything that puts you into more stress.
The less we participate and are complicit in the deception, in the lies, in all of it. We have to all put our, you got to make a decision. Are we going to keep going along with the lies, or are we not? And if we do, are we lemmings jumping off the bridge, or are we not? That's what it all boils down to. So I think we're almost done. And boy, oh boy,
we will be back
so fun.
In January 2024, people.
That's right. Thank you, Bill. So, hey, we got next Saturday off.
Right.
Hot damn. That's great. But hey, I'd like to thank everybody for supporting the Freedom Link and KGRA DB over 2023 for shizzle. That's right. Uncle Bill making a cameo.
Yeah, next week.
Yes.
First of all, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and Happy New Year to all the viewers and listeners out there. And thank you for your support of the Freedom Link, Rabbit Hole Radio, and all the other programming on KGRA. And guys, are you kidding me? Next week it's going to be nutty with getting ready for the New Year's Eve party and cooking.
Yes, indeed.
You know what
Indeed
I mean?
is.
And you got to get on a certain sleep schedule where you could sleep a little extra late.
Oof, yeah.
That recovery time, my friend. The recovery time.
So again, guys, Merry Christmas to all you and your families and everybody that's watching and listening.
All right, everybody.
Absolutely. Have a great night, everybody, and we'll see you all later.
Adios.